Where do good ideas come from? Neuroscientists estimate that human beings have between 12 and 50,000 individual thoughts each day, one every 2 to 3 seconds. Many of those thoughts fall within a broad definition of an idea. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, an idea is a conception or notion of something to be done or carried out. An intention, a plan of action. Ideas range from the mundane to those that can change the course of life, to the intellectually and scientifically sublime. At the level of science, we need a more nuanced definition. When idea is used to describe a scientific principle, it is defined as an object of knowledge, a theory. A theory is a system of statements held as an explanation of a group of facts or phenomena. An hypothesis that has been established by observation or experiment. A statement of what are held to be the general causes of something observed. Our perception of ideas on each of these levels is, at best, imperfect. We frequently speak of them as mystical, even alien things. They come to us unbidden. Somehow or another, they are just there. A recent award-winning children's book portrays the birth of an idea like this. One day I had an idea. Where did it come from? Why is it here? At first, I didn't think much of it. It seemed kind of strange and fragile. I didn't know what to do with it. The language we use to describe ideas captures and reinforces this sense of unfathomability. This language emphasizes suddenness and unexpectedness. Ideas happen without warning. They occur without apparent design. We speak of flashes of brilliance. We refer to the bolt coming out of the blue. We talk of blink-like moments of clarity. Insight suddenly dawns on us. A bright idea switches on like a light bulb inside our heads. The story of one particularly popular term for describing this moment of enlightenment comes with a memorable, if ultimately apocryphal, story attached to it. The Greek scholar Archimedes was asked by the king of Syracuse to determine whether the royal crown was pure gold or a mixture of gold and lead. This posed a serious problem for Archimedes. The task was beyond the abilities of scientists at the time. One day, as Archimedes stepped into his bath, he noticed that the water level rose. He noticed the volume of water his submerged body displaced. The resulting rise in water level had to be equal to the volume of his body. Suddenly, the answer to his problem was clear. He could measure the density of the crown and thus determine its purity by submerging it in a tub of water and measuring the change in water level. He leaped from his bath and ran naked through the streets of Syracuse, shouting, "Eureka! Eureka! I have found it! I have found it!" Archimedes experienced the first eureka moment, the sudden, unexpected discovery of the solution to a problem. If our day-to-day experience with ideas leaves us mystified when we confront the loftier ideas of science with which we have virtually no experience, we are easily overwhelmed. As science writer Mike Klimkowski puts it, over the years, scientists have come to accept some deeply weird ideas, many with uncomfortable ramifications. They accept these ideas because of the scientific process, a process that is not well appreciated, nor, we might add, is it well understood by the general public. As with many things that exist outside of our normal experience, we tend to mythologize both the idea and the process that created it. We stand in awe. We then associate a person with the idea and invest that individual with a peculiar genius that exists well beyond the poor powers of common people like us. Because great ideas are solitary things that turn up at unexpected times and in unexpected places, they must of necessity occur to exceptional people. Truly great ideas occur to truly great minds. They spring fully formed from the minds of gifted and creative single individuals. In consequence of this mythology, we underestimate and doubt our own capacity to produce similar ideas. We think ourselves incapable. We have neither the mental ability nor the peculiar insight necessary to the creation of great ideas. The purpose of this video is to confront, understand, and ultimately dismiss this mythology. In considering his own quest to discover recurring patterns that we can learn from, that we can take and apply to our own research lives to make them more creative and innovative, what are the environments that lead to unusual levels of innovation, unusual levels of creativity? What is the space of creativity? Let's start by examining the principal components of the great idea mythology. First, are ideas really best described as sudden flashes of brilliance?
Thanks so much for taking the time to sit down with us, Dr. S. We're just having a really hard time coming up with an idea for our research paper.
Well, that's what I'm here for. What's the problem?
I just can't seem to think of anything. And whenever I do come up with something, it seems dumb or not good enough for this assignment.
Okay, well, as we talked about in class, every research project, the great, the small, begins with an idea. Don't sell yourself short. This happens to everyone. We have hundreds of ideas every day, but when put on the spot, it seems impossible, right?
Yeah, like I have the same problem. It's like the idea or the inspiration just isn't there when I need it.
Then you probably won't be surprised that the process of finding a research topic has been compared to repeatedly bumping your head up against a wall.
Yeah.
Does that describe your feeling?
Yeah, it does, but it's worse. It's like you're bumping your head against the wall because you're stumbling around in the dark. Like your brain, it can't figure out how to turn on a light.
I think what you have to realize is that the feeling of stumbling around in the dark, isn't necessarily a bad thing. Experienced researchers will tell you that finding a research topic isn't about you finding an idea. It's about you bumping into them while banging your head against a wall. Research ideas fade into view over long periods of time. These periods might best be described as slow hunches.
Well, it sounds like a slow hunch is the exact opposite of a sudden flash of insight.
Right. So don't give up. The most important thing is that you continue to push through. Eventually you'll stumble upon a worthwhile idea.
Okay, so I'm starting to understand that I shouldn't just wait around for a great idea to appear. But what are we supposed to think when our entire understanding of where great ideas come from stories of eureka moments and sudden flashes of brilliance?
Those are exaggerated stories and myths that we use to romanticize our history. It's more fun to think that ideas just appear, but trust me, it's never that easy. So, like I said, don't think of ideas as flashes. They're stumbled upon.
Well, I understand that much. I'm stumbling now.
All great researchers found themselves stumbling at one point or another. And quite frankly, they didn't realize that they had a great idea until a lot of trial and error.
So you're saying that ideas come in pieces, they're not fully formed. If that's right, then coming up with a great idea is kind of like taking 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards. That would take a lot of time to come up with a brilliant idea.
Exactly. It's a process of mentally toying around with combinations of ideas. When you finally stumble upon a useful combination, you move forward until the next roadblock. It's a quest, an investigation of sorts. Tracking your progress will help you move forward, and it will also show you just how far you've come. Okay, so are you starting to feel a little bit better?
I feel better knowing I'm not the only one who has this problem. Even the greatest researchers felt lost sometimes. I guess awaiting a flash of brilliance just isn't realistic.
Exactly. So go get started banging your head against a wall, and come back tomorrow and let me know how it's going.
Okay.
Is it simply that the eureka moment fails to describe the reality of idea formation, or might the influence of such a perception actually create serious problems for researchers?
Thanks for meeting with us again, Dr. S. I'm really struggling. This paper's due soon and I still don't know what to write about.
Yeah, same here.
Well, tell me how you've worked on previous assignments for this class. What kind of strategies did you use?
Strategies? Yeah, okay. My major strategy is procrastination. I typically put an assignment off for as long as possible and then write it a day or two before it's due.
And how did that work out for you?
Stressful. Look, I kept putting it off because I'm having the same problem I'm having now. I just couldn't think of what to write about. And to be honest with you, I ended up using an article from a different class as the foundation for that assignment. And without that article, I highly doubt I would have had anything to turn in.
Well, but did you really need that article? Or was it more likely that the idea you ended up focusing on was based on some handy information that just happened to be available?
I'm not sure I know what you mean.
When you try to write a paper in 1 or 2 sittings, and that's certainly something I did when I was in college, you're influenced in part by your hope that a flash of insight or a eureka moment will produce a useful idea.
It's comforting to know even you had this problem.
Sometimes we have to learn the hard way that research ideas don't merely appear. When we wait for a flash to generate an idea, the resulting idea can come with some baggage that could negatively influence the rest of the research process.
Wait, what? Like drama? I don't need any more baggage in my life.
Okay, maybe that wasn't the correct term to use. Cognitive psychologists, the folks that study how people think and acquire knowledge, tell us that waiting for and then latching on to a eureka moment makes us susceptible to something called the availability heuristic.
Okay, now I'm confused. I understand that we shouldn't wait for ideas to flash and that idea formation is a process. But what in the world is a heuristic? And what does that have to do with writing my paper?
Okay, I'll slow down. A heuristic is simply a mental shortcut or a rule of thumb. It's a quick and easy way to make a decision.
So, like a process for learning or doing something?
Exactly. So what you did with your last assignment was use information available to you from that article to form a new idea. You used something called an availability shortcut. You based new assumptions off the information you were exposed to in the article.
I didn't even know I was doing that. Now I'm even more confused.
Okay, let's try this. What if I told you Anne walked to the bank? What do you think Anne's doing?
Well, obviously Anne is going to the bank.
To do what?
Well, who knows? Maybe she needs to cash a check or use the ATM.
And what if I told you that Anne was carrying a fishing pole?
Oh, well that changes things. Now I would say that Anne's going to the bank of a river to fish.
Right, but your immediate go-to answer was that Anne was headed to a financial institution. That was based on how easy it was to make a quick connection between what you knew about Anne and your own readily available experience. That's the availability heuristic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So you're saying that because I read that article before writing my paper, my brain assumed that the two were connected. But I got a pretty good grade on that paper, so my teacher must have thought they were related too.
Well, just because you got a good grade doesn't mean that your research wasn't overly influenced by that article that you read. Here's one more example. Do you have any friends that when they're telling a story, they chime in with anything that's kind of related, but really doesn't, and they're just talking to talk?
Have you met my roommate?
Well, it's kind of the same thing. Just because something relates doesn't mean it's contributing to the conversation. In terms of your current research, sitting in front of a keyboard and using what's currently available makes eureka moments entirely undependable.
So just because my roommate's talking doesn't make what she's saying valid.
I suppose, but don't tell your roommate I said that.
So what I'm beginning to understand is that the availability heuristic is about as reliable as my roommate on Rent.
Well, but isn't it true that your roommate's reliable some of the time?
Yeah.
In terms of the availability heuristic, don't completely discredit recently learned information, but we do need to make sure that we don't rely on it entirely.
I see. So it's okay to use some of what I've recently learned in my research process, but I should build from there. So if we go back to the topic of my roommate, I believe that he's unreliable, so therefore I should look for information to prove what I already believe.
No, but it's funny you bring that up, because there's another factor that I want to talk to you about. You also need to be aware of the influence of another cognitive shortcut, the confirmation bias.
Great, another heuristic. You're making my brain hurt.
Now, yes, another heuristic, but I think you'll have a much easier time with this one. Confirmation bias is the tendency we all possess to search for an explanation for new information that reinforces what we already strongly believe. This bias will also limit or maybe even stop altogether our search for information which might contradict or disprove our beliefs.
Oh yeah, I see that all around me. especially in an election year. Even more so with people that I disagree with.
And there's a perfect example. You just admitted your own bias. But don't worry, it's human nature to resist change and cling to our old, familiar ideas. It's easier to believe information that supports and strengthens them. Now, with respect to research ideas, let me give you a deadly formula. Confirmation bias plus availability heuristic leads to camouflaged eureka moments, or failure. This combination makes it likely that a eureka moment, whenever and however it appears, can seem like insight, but beware. Unless we are consciously careful, and that means not waiting around for flashes, this combination will negatively influence our research from the beginning.
So what you're saying is I shouldn't be waiting around for an idea, or my research paper might be evidence of this deadly formula?
Exactly. So be happy that you don't find yourself having eureka moments. Enjoy the blind stumble we talked about earlier. It's all part of being a researcher.
So, a eureka moment doesn't accurately describe idea formation, but we are still left to wonder if the great idea, however it finally emerges, appears as something brand new under the sun. Does it emerge in so coherent and well-formed a way that it is capable not only of standing on its own, but of unsettling the rest of the intellectual world?
To be honest, my biggest problem is I doubt my ability to do the kind of research that you talk about in class and we read about in textbooks. I honestly I don't think I'm capable of that kind of research.
You're not alone, you know. In my experience, most researchers at one time or another doubt their ability. I think it stems from the fact that when we approach a research question, we feel alone. The entire success or failure of the project rests on the shoulders of a single person, you. And it surely doesn't help matters that any good insights are frequently accompanied by the word brilliant. Then, when you finally do come up with an idea, it seems inadequate or just plain dumb.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Brilliant ideas just won't come for me. I mean, come on. There's no way I'm going to come up with something as good as a Harvard professor or one of those gurus you see on TV. It's not going to happen.
Okay, let's talk first about those feelings of inadequacy. We'll talk about research loneliness a bit later on. As I said, the combination of the two are real obstacles for all beginning researchers. When I was a student, I felt inadequate too, and the secret no one tells you is that after you leave school and become a professor, those feelings of inadequacy continue. I felt as a student, and sometimes I still feel, that really important ideas occur to special people, even though we know that ideas don't flash. Part of us still believe that we should accept the brilliance in the phrase flashes of brilliance. Am I right?
Yes, I know ideas aren't flashes, but I don't feel that way. I mean, Einstein's ideas, they weren't exactly common.
True enough. There are certainly gifted people out there in the world, but saying that gifted people come up with good ideas is really different than saying only gifted people come up with good ideas. Good ideas are the brain children of brilliant people, and they make for better stories that do a really poor job of describing reality. For every Albert Einstein, there are hundreds of Philo T. Farnsworths.
Philo T. who?
Farnsworth. You have a smartphone. Look him up.
Okay. Okay, well, Wikipedia says he was an American inventor and a television pioneer. He made many contributions to the early development of all electronic television. He is best known for inventing the first functioning image pickup device, a video camera tube, as well as the first complete television system.
He's often thought of as the father of television, and I think you might agree he had one or two good ideas.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of him before?
No, never. It seems a little surprising given the impact that television has had on the world today.
We could easily identify many more people whose great ideas we haven't heard about. The majority of those that develop new technologies and ideas are not geniuses. They are motivated, regular people. This means that good ideas, even great ones, spread more widely among many more people than the great person mythology suggests. In fact, many good ideas are not produced by a single individual. In addition to Farnsworth, many individuals contributed to the development of the television, some working in collaboration and others simply learning from the work done before.
So you're saying that ordinary people come up with great ideas all the time. I know that should make me feel better, but I actually feel like there's more pressure on me now. Like, now my excuse for not having a great idea is gone.
Yeah, I am saying that ordinary people come up with good ideas. In fact, I'll go further and tell you that most good ideas out there came from ordinary people. We just don't hear much about them. But I think your discomfort stems from your continued belief that the responsibility for coming up with good ideas rests on the shoulders of single people, in this case, on your shoulders. Studies of innovation find that good ideas occur in environments where different people from different backgrounds work together and share ideas. We should talk about that too.
Yes, please, but we actually have to run to a class right now. Could we come back later and talk about it?
Absolutely.
So the last time we talked, you said that ordinary people develop innovative ideas by working together. That there are actual research studies that show that people from different backgrounds getting together in a room and talking about their ideas is how the best ideas are made or formed. But I thought a lot about what you were saying, and I can't for the life of me figure out how somebody would observe that.
Good, you're right to be skeptical.
Well, I have learned something from your class too. You always tell us to question sweeping conclusions and to ask us like whether we see something because it's there or if it's there because we see it. Yeah. Well, this kind of pertains to researchers. Like, is collaboration actually a good thing, or do researchers just find things they see to support their claims? Does that make any sense?
Wow, very good. You're asking me to support my claim that there is actual credible research validating the importance of collaboration. So, let's talk about a study conducted by Kevin Dunbar. Dunbar is a professor of human development and quantitative methodology at the University of Maryland. He's one of the foremost authorities on the way scientists think, reason, and interact. All of his research is aimed at better understanding how great ideas form and where they come from. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I think, but can you tell me a little bit more about the research?
Sure. Let's talk about one of his most well-known studies. The method was fairly simple. Dunbar visited science labs around the world and filmed people doing all sorts of typical laboratory functions. He was even able to record individual conversations in lab meetings. He did all of this in an attempt to discover and document the moment when an important research idea is born. When you think of researchers working in a lab, what sort of things do you picture?
Well, I kind of picture people in lab coats hunched over microscopes, like poring over test tubes and results, trying to come up with a conclusion.
That's certainly the popular conception. It's reflected and reinforced in television programs, movies, ad campaigns. So what would the moment of discovery look like?
Although we've talked about how this isn't true, I still picture somebody saying, "I found it. I found the cure. I've made the discovery."
And as I'm sure you know, you're describing the classic eureka moment in the life of a solitary researcher. But that's not what Dunbar saw when he watched those hours and hours of video. What he found was that almost no big ideas occurred in the laboratory. None of the ideas occurred to solitary researchers. Instead, ideas emerged around conference tables during weekly lab meetings. They occurred when lots of different people got together to share their latest findings, their mistakes, and the problems that they were having. He found that collections of people, communities of scholars, talking to one another were the real sources of big ideas. He concluded that people with different backgrounds and interests and different experiences formed a creative space that encouraged innovative thinking that gave rise to research ideas. Do Dunbar's findings surprise you?
Well, based on what we've talked about, I know they shouldn't, but they do. You see, the great ideas we talk about in my classes or I read about in textbooks are always credited to a single person. No one ever mentions communities of scholars or creative spaces.
Yeah, right. Like, I've been taught from the time I started school that, like, your work should be your work and yours alone. Otherwise, it's plagiarism or cheating. It's like my entire student life has been a lie. It has taught me that schoolwork should be done by individuals. And if it's not, there will be harsh penalties.
Yeah, but even more than that, we're taught that all the great discoveries are made by great and gifted people. E equals MC squared, Albert Einstein, Apple and Steve Jobs, Microsoft and Bill Gates.
Yeah, so like if research really does go the way you're saying it does and the way Dunbar says, no one's telling us about it, so why does it surprise you that we have such a problem with the process?
Hey, I agree with you. Teachers and textbooks don't do a very good job of explaining the early stages of the research process. That's the reason we're talking about these issues. These are things you need to know about, and I'm convinced that knowing such things will help you overcome your feelings of inadequacy, of dumbness when you try to develop your own research ideas. To paraphrase the words of one researcher, we don't teach you to be usefully stupid. The search for all research ideas begins with the willingness of the researcher to embrace his or her own stupidity about a topic. So let's talk about what you guys have learned.
Well, good research ideas do not typically occur in solitary researchers.
A free-flowing exchange of information is crucial to the formation of good research ideas.
Good ideas take root in creative spaces where people from different backgrounds and areas of expertise get together and share.
Finally, is our tendency to see great ideas as the brainchildren of great individuals reasonable? We might infer from our previous discussion that a great idea takes a community of interconnected minds, and therefore the great person explanation is flawed. However, it will prove illuminating to consider this tendency in its own right.
The last time we met, you said that good research ideas come from group discussions where everyone can share their knowledge. But what if we don't have a group of researchers? My research project, actually all of my research projects, have been individual papers. I don't have a group or a lab of people to help me come up with ideas. So what am I supposed to do?
That's a good question. How do we social scientists engage with other ideas? Like you said, we don't usually work in labs, and we don't have weekly lab meetings. There's no natural, ready-made creative space for us to rely on. So we can make ourselves part of a community of scholars through what political scientist Kenneth Hoover called reasoned judgment. He selected the term and combined the terms reason and judgment to describe a particular feature of the social science environment that may help you. Reason is the logical connection between existing knowledge and the research idea you want to investigate. Judgment is a means of problem solving that makes the best possible use of existing knowledge. Now that you have Hoover's definition of reasoned judgment, how do you interpret this and talk about it in terms of your own research ideas?
Well, it seems to place a lot of emphasis on existing knowledge. So I think that Hoover assumes that new researchers like us need to rely on what old researchers like you have done.
I assume by new you mean less experienced, and by old you mean more experienced.
Right. So new researchers, then, just need to know what old researchers have done on the particular topic of study. It's a specific kind of knowledge, right? I mean, he's not saying we need to know what every researcher has ever researched.
Very good. That's exactly what Hoover means.
Right. You have to be able to see the connection between what the old researchers have done and like what you're trying to do.
Is this reasoned judgment something I've heard called literature review?
Well, it's not quite that formalized yet, but yeah, it might become a full-fledged literature review. At this stage, it might be more useful to call it literature awareness. You start by familiarizing yourself with what others have written about the idea that interests you. Your goal is to discover what's already been done. You also need to understand what part of that previous research specifically applies to your idea. By making yourself familiar with this research, you're joining a community of like-minded scholars. You discover, in the words of Steven Johnson, that hunches connect. One person has half of an idea, and somebody else has the other half. In the right environment, these connected hunches turn into something larger than the sum of their parts.
It seems to me that becoming familiar with the work of older researchers further supports the idea that ideas don't flare into existence. Is that right?
Very good. Most great ideas derive from a long buildup of knowledge. That old knowledge comes to us as the legacy of generations of researchers. It would be foolish for us not to take advantage of that legacy. It would be equally foolish for us to believe that when we have an idea, perhaps even a great idea, we're isolated and must trudge ahead alone. The idea itself is our admissions ticket to a larger community of scholars. Again, to quote Steven Johnson, we take ideas from other people, from people we've learned from, and we stitch them together with our ideas into new forms, creating something new. Since you're making connections with other things we've talked about, Tell me how you think our conversations fit together. What does this conversation add to our knowledge about how research ideas emerge?
Well, I would say that it expands what it means to be part of a community of researchers. Familiarizing ourselves with the work of other researchers makes us part of that community. We don't need to surround ourselves with labs and groups of researchers. We only need to surround ourselves with journal articles and pieces of research other people have done.
Good. Anything else?
Yes, research ideas connect. We learn from others, and that new knowledge improves the quality of our research ideas.
And that further supports the fact that great ideas don't develop or happen in isolation.
Yes, exactly. Very good.
I like to picture that ideas stitched together to fill in the holes in our knowledge.
That's an excellent point. I like how you're extending Johnson's metaphor. Keep going.
Okay, well, good ideas do not flash suddenly into existence. They occur as the result of slow hunches over long periods of time.
Yes, and what we think we know and our natural preference of what we think we know can sometimes mean that bias can masquerade as insight.
And, connecting to this conversation, they don't occur in isolation. They are products of shared knowledge and collaborative spaces.
Reasoned judgment gives us access to a community of scholars.
I like what was said a little while ago. Ideas stitched together to fill in the holes in our knowledge.
Excellent. You guys are really listening and understanding what we've been talking about. Anything else?
Not from me. I think we hit all the high points.
I agree. You have a firm grasp of the basic concepts.
I definitely feel like I have a better perspective and definitely some more tools, but I still feel like there might need to be a little more reinforcement.
Yeah, me too. This is a great start, but I still need more.
Of course, it takes time and experience to master these skills. I'm not about to abandon you now. We still have a lot more to consider together, and I have some really cool things for the class to think about.
Cool in your world or cool in ours?
I guess you'll just have to come and find out.
Well, we have said a lot about ideas, but talk is cheap. It is useful talk about what others have discovered about the formation of research ideas. The challenge is to use that talk to help you move with confidence into your own research project. It is very helpful to know about the experience of others, but you need to experience these things for yourself. This is where things get tricky. It's tricky because, for the most part, your only experience with research to this point in your student life has been with finished product research, as it appears in textbooks, is presented at professional conferences, or published in academic journals. We might call this proxy experience that usually happens to someone else. This proxy experience creates some serious problems for a novice researcher. It gives you no direct experience with the very earliest stages of the research process. You hear about, read about, and study perfected research. Articles, books, and presentations may review their early stages, but they do so in the polished and certain terms of the perfected end product. The tentativeness, the ambiguity, the outcome uncertainty that truly describe the early stage research process is totally inaccessible to you. Teachers try, but ultimately cannot model these early stages for you with the same ease, confidence, and clarity that is possible for every other stage. Variable identification, hypothesis formation, data collection, data analysis, and the writing of the research paper. Finally, the textbooks we assign in our research methods classes, apart from list-like discussions of good research questions, do a poor job of describing exactly how practiced researchers actually come up with good research ideas. You have been inadequately prepared. In the words of Martin Schwartz, we professors, don't do a good enough job of teaching our students, you, how to be productively stupid. Productive stupidity means being ignorant by choice. The resulting hole in your understanding creates very real problems for you as you try to do good research. If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. This describes your situation. You may judge yourself unable to come up with a good research idea, but that is only because you lack experience and no one has ever shown you how to do it. You are not inadequate, your education is inadequate. Of course, personal experience is the best learning tool available to you. However, before you can gain that experience, we must first show you how to be productively stupid. Productive stupidity is the subject of our next program. Here's a good idea. Join us for that conversation. See you soon.